Hello, everyone. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery Coach and best-selling lead author of the new book, Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment, which is now available on Amazon at the link below. Welcome to my chapter reading series for this book, in which you get to meet each author and listen in during a personal reading of that person's entire chapter from this amazing book. Today, my guest is Carol Pilkington, who contributed Chapter 7. Carol is a spiritual counselor with over 30 years of combined training in spirituality, astrological counseling, personal development, and deep transformational work. She works with high-functioning, high-achieving entrepreneurs and executives who are living in a state of anxiety, depression, or grief and loss. Welcome, Carol, and thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great, although I have to admit I have been busy, as you can probably imagine. I think, Carol, what I'd like to do is I'd like to start by having you maybe share with the audience what it is that inspired you to participate in this project, in this collaborative book project, right from the start.
Well, one of the things is you asking me. I was very honored to have you ask me, but I also love the concept. You know, I am of a certain age and I have lived a while, so I do feel that I have something to contribute to those out there that are maybe are on a journey, beginning their journey. And I feel that this concept of elder wisdom, which is what we first started out with, and attracted me. I just really fell in love with the whole idea. And then collaborating with all these wonderful, talented authors was a real pleasure and an honor.
Right. Well, and thank you. I'm really grateful that you accepted the invitation to join the team. And you're right, it is a pretty amazing team. A lot of brilliant people sharing some brilliant stories and practices. And of course, yours is there as well. One of the beautiful practices that we're going to find out about here in just a moment. And speaking of that, now, first of all, you mentioned this idea of elder wisdom, and I have to confess, that's what I originally wanted to call this. And but as more and more people were being attracted into the project, I realized that wisdom really is not limited to people with white hair and wrinkles. Of course, that's an obvious thing now that I say it, but my point is that I decided to open it up so that people, of all ages who had some connection to their inner sage could participate in this. And I think it really worked out for the best.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Carol, I've heard you share in some of our private conversations that I believe you said that you ended up writing something that you didn't know you were going to write about. Tell us a little bit about your journey in writing this chapter and how you got to where you arrived.
Well, I think what happens generally with me is that I never know until right up until the moment that I need to add pen to paper what I'm going to do or what I'm going to write about. This isn't my first book, but it's just one of those intuitive processes that comes to me, that speaks to me and says, this is what it's about and what I feel people will resonate with. And we don't often recognize that anything that we do and say has an impact on everyone around us. And writing this chapter was really important to me to put that out there so that people do know that they matter, that they matter no matter what. They matter simply because they exist and their voice matters. And so that's what I wanted to share with the world.
Right. And that certainly resonates for me. I totally agree with what you're saying. I don't want to try and steal any of your thunder. I want to give you a chance to read this chapter in your own voice so people can hear it right from you directly, right from your heart. So, folks, without any further ado, I'm going to say, please give your full attention to Carol Pilkington as she reads Chapter 7, Your Voice Matters, You Matter. Don't let anyone shut you down.
My story. I'm 10 or 11 years old. Like many other nights eating dinner at the kitchen table, my father, my mother, and my older sister, by 4.5 years, are talking as I listen. My head turns side to side as the banter between my father and my sister goes back and forth. But this night, I decided to chime in. Something in the conversation piqued my interest, and I wanted to add my 2 cents. As I tried to get my point of view across, I heard this frustrated, annoyed voice roaring from my father. Carol, you're saying a lot of words, but you aren't saying anything. My heart feels like it stopped beating. I shut up immediately. I was devastated, and all I wanted to do was to run away, but I couldn't move. I felt glued to the chair. I can't remember attempting to participate in another mealtime conversation. I felt so stupid, and I wasn't going to take that risk again. Little did I realize how much that incident would monitor what I would or would not say for years to come. In school, I rarely raised my hand to answer a question unless I was certain I knew it. Even then, I always hesitated. I never wanted to be wrong or appear stupid. And in 5th grade, I was asked to go to the blackboard to solve a problem. On this one day, my sister's former 5th grade teacher was substituting for my class. My sister was very smart, and I looked up to her. When I had trouble figuring out problems, the teacher said something like, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Again, I was mortified and embarrassed in front of the whole class. Another confirmation that I should keep my mouth shut. My mother was like a lion protecting her cub. I found out years later that she went to the principal's office and stood up. I got to know and love my mother more for the human being she was after she died in 1974 than when she was alive. I never got to know her as adult daughters often do. I was 20 when she died of cancer. A turning point. One thing these earlier experiences taught me was to listen and observe. My nature in general, as far back as I can remember, has been to be quiet, reflective, and observant. I was in my early 20s when I was with a group of friends having philosophical conversations, and I was my usual quiet self. When all at once I said something in response to what everyone was saying, and the room quiet. There was a popular commercial at the time with the slogan, "When E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens." There were people gathered and chattering, and when E.F. Hutton spoke, everyone stopped and turned their heads. Well, it was that kind of moment. After I spoke, it was as though there was nothing else to say. Someone said to me, "You're so quiet, but wow. When you do say something, it's like you wrap up everything we've been talking about in such a clear, succinct way. How do you do that?" I heard everyone. I understood everyone and summed it all up in a nutshell. I literally blew their mind. At the first time it was the first time I realized that people heard and understood what I had to say, and it was the spark of a new journey for me. Maybe people do hear what I have to say. My voice does matter. I matter. There was more evidence of this throughout my my career in IT, information technology. I never rose to the level of manager, not for the lack of it, but for not having a college degree, as it was so necessary in those days. Nor was I ever officially a supervisor. However, time and time again, high-level directors and company officers came to me over my direct managers for advice and opinion. Still more work to do. Even though I had these wonderful moments when I felt my voice mattered, I was still shy about opening up, especially about things that mattered to me. I was afraid of being crushed. As I look back, I recall there was resentment. On the one hand, I wanted to say something but wouldn't out of fear and rejection. On the other hand, I got upset when no one would ask me what I thought, or I felt ignored and invisible. What resulted was me interrupting or trying to insert my opinions at inappropriate times, which disrupted the whole flow. Or I stewed in silence, feeling I wasn't being seen, with that old trigger of not feeling like my voice mattered, that I didn't matter, kicking in. It was a no-win all the way around. I admonished and shamed myself by inappropriateness, which only made things worse and caused me to shut down even more. You know, when you are sitting around talking and whoever is speaking will often make eye contact with each person in the group? Well, there was this one person in the group that would never make eye contact with me, and it made me feel as though I wasn't part of the conversation and that I was invisible. The topic would change, and I'd get pissed off that I did not get to say what I wanted on the matter discussed before. This one time, I thoroughly embarrassed myself and yelled, "I can never get a word in edgewise." I stood up to walk out the door, and this person said, "If you walk out, you don't get to come back." It was a teaching moment. More about that later. What you seek is seeking you. This is the last line of the famous Rumi quote, and I've experienced it to be true throughout my life. I took EST, which is the Earhart Seminar Training, now known as Landmark, in the early 80s, which was great, but not enough. It would be another 20 years before Jim, my best friend and teacher, came into my life and took me to levels of consciousness and evolution I couldn't even imagine. I was ready. He and I met through a personals ad on Yahoo. So yes, he was seeking me too. He was new to Los Angeles and trying to get his footing in a new state and city. My life changed forever the day we met. He was a Jungian therapist who used astrology in his clinical practice and was also trained and experienced in metaphysics and mysticism. He couldn't practice in California as a therapist without practically starting all over again by getting the hours he needed last year. He already had 35 years in clinical and private practice, so he wanted to do that. He decided to become a teacher of astrology and metaphysics. I have been blessed to reap the benefits of his vast and eclectic knowledge and teachings. Not only did I learn astrology, but also and about the Golden Dawn and so much more. I not only learned, but I had transformative experience that would change me at a DNA level too much off the topic to go into here. One of the things I learned, which might sound counterintuitive at first, was to exaggerate that trigger and play it out. Once I became aware of this deep trigger of feeling that my voice and how that played out in my life in all the ways described above, I had to make it real and see it fully from all angles. Remember the story I told you about regarding not being acknowledged in conversations? Well, this exercise that I'm about to share cured all of that, and the person I referred to was Jim. Jim would say, once you see the trigger in its entirety, what are you going to do about it? He would say, what you can do is consciously amplify and exaggerate it. This is the fun part, if you can believe it. Because once you see something fully, it no longer has its claws in you, and you can begin to consciously play with it. I decided to start a networking group where I was the leader, of course. And what happens when you are the leader in front of the room? Everyone listens to you. You have a captive audience. Nothing could have been better or more fun. This exercise turned into a lifelong growth spurt and changed so many levels. I no longer craved attention. I no longer felt invisible. I no longer felt that I didn't have a voice. It gave me the freedom to speak when I really had something to contribute to a conversation rather than blurt things out at inappropriate moments that didn't make any sense. I enjoyed being able to listen intently and know that I had a choice to speak or not. I governed my choices based on whether or not I felt that I had to say that what I had to say would move the conversation forward, or whether it was a righteous opinion I wanted to assert to satisfy my own self-importance. To be brutally honest with oneself is key, as it saves any repercussions and negative consequences afterwards. The other thing that came out of doing this exercise and becoming aware of this deeply embedded trigger was that no one was doing anything to me. I created my own misery and suffering, and I am the author of my own reality. The practice. Try it for yourself and see what happens. Pick something you know triggers the heck out of you, spontaneously gets you viscerally riled, seemingly out of the blue. That's the nature of a trigger. And every time it raises its ugly head and disrupts your life, you want to hide in embarrassment and shame because you've caught yourself in this situation yet again. See how it is played out in your life in all its forms. Again, I like to say you have to be willing to be brutally honest with yourself and finally want to exercise this puppy. Example. Has anyone ever called you a whiny, complaining baby? Have you heard it more than once and from different sources in one way or another? That, and look at the nature of what drives it. And when you've tapped into it, see it fully. Give every facet of it the light of day, taking it out of the shadows. There is no room for shame and blame here. It's pure observation, no judging. Otherwise, it just digs its claws into you deeper. Instead, this is where you get to see it and consciously play with it, exaggerate it, and have fun with it. Write an elaborate story about it if you like. If you're in the company of people you know, and they're the ones who called you whiny, play it up. Don't wilt and shrivel. You'll have fun, and they will too. And they'll begin to see a change in you. I guarantee this deeper trigger will begin to loosen its grip on you, if not immediately, over time, and you'll feel freer than you could ever imagine. It might actually rear its head in other ways later on, but you'll catch it quicker and be less inclined to hide from it. If you find that that particular trigger is too big, too much to tackle, be observant of other things on a smaller scale and practice and play until you're ready to take on the deeper things. You might even discover that they're connected. In closing, we tend to take ourselves way too seriously. And when we become aware of our triggers and play with them, we know we're on the right track. And often we see how far we've come in the rearview mirror. When we become aware of something that used to trigger us, and now tends to just roll off our shoulder, we can see how far we've come. The more courage we have to make the unconscious conscious, the higher we raise our self-awareness and awareness of others.
I really found myself resonating with your stories about not being heard, or even having parents shut me down because my ideas weren't smart enough, weren't bright enough. I can so resonate for that. Or even being told, I remember my grandfather used to say things like, children should be seen and not heard. And I knew from the way he said it, it wasn't a joke. For him, it was like serious. Yeah, so I understand this tendency of some parents to even inadvertently shut down their children and to tell them in their own way that, what you're saying is completely irrelevant. It has no bearing on anything in my life. So kindly shut up. I can so resonate with that.
For me, it was, I was the youngest in the whole family at the time. It was only my sister and I, but also my sister and I were the oldest of all of our cousins. And so it was really difficult finding my way in the sea of adults and trying to fit in, trying to belong, trying to express myself. And I know my father didn't really, he wasn't trying to shut me down. I had always had a wonderful relationship with my father, even more so up until the time he died. And it wasn't even something that he probably even thought about after. It's amazing how these moments in time can really have an impact on us.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And most of it is because we put it into the background. We tell ourselves, most of the story, as I was listening to you, most of this I don't matter stuff is things we take on. I'm sure that nobody ever said to you, your voice doesn't matter, you don't matter. People don't talk like that. They don't tell their kids that sort of thing. But they give them the message in other ways, that we kind of invent the stories ourselves. And then as a result, we tell ourselves, oh, I have to shut up. I have to stay quiet. I have to do this or that or the other thing. It's really interesting how these unconscious negative beliefs have such a strong impact on us for a long time in our lives, and maybe don't even show up until we're adults, maybe even married, or maybe even have kids. Who knows? It can happen at such a late time in life. And then when it comes back, you kind of look at it and say, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Carol, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your chapter with us and for telling us all about what you do. I think it's just beautiful. And friends, I just want you to understand that this is just one example of some of the amazing and fantastic material that's available in our book, Gifts of Wisdom. So if you haven't already purchased a copy, or if you'd like to consider gifting a copy to one of your friends or family or something like that, just please head over to our Amazon book page, and I've included the link here below. And please remember to reach out to Carol. You know, she's got her links all there in the book. You can connect with her there and find out more about her. And also, she's got an offer here on my website that you can connect with her and maybe have a personal experience with her as well. So thank you all for stopping by. Thank you, Carol, for being here. I hope to see you all again soon for one of the other videos in this series. Love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.